it is an amazing process that we are going through and living through and seeing, not just in one election cycle, but from the past to the future. It's just an incredible experiment that we're on. It's just amazing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this is a nation ran by the people, for the people. We, the people, are the ones that get to decide the fate of this nation and pave the path for those to follow.
And this is why the vote is so sacred, right? The vote matters.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 110. In this episode, I speak with TS Niam and Al from The Vote Matters. This was an incredible conversation, and unlike anyone we've ever done before, as we usually don't go the political route. But since the presidential election is coming up, we thought it would be appropriate, and we had a great discussion. Thank you, TS Niam and Al, for coming on, and thank you very much for the Vote Matter t-shirts that you got Eric and I. Very much appreciated. To watch this episode, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. To listen to this podcast, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Here's my conversation with TS Niam and Al of The Vote Matters. Well, TS Niam, Al of The Vote Matters, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
This is a treat, and thank you for being our quote-unquote experiment of our first two guest setup at our home base here.
Yo.
But, when we were looking, this is going to come out 2 weeks before the presidential election. And I'm just looking at the timing of it. I'm like, at the opportunity. And I love what you guys are doing at The Vote Matters with your channel. And I'm like, we got to have both of them. So thank you both for.
No, thanks for accommodating. Cause I know we were trying to set up a day to do this podcast. And at first I was like, okay, October 8th sounds like a good time. But he was only available October 1st. And that's when I was like, okay, you know what? We're shifting gears. And at the time, it was still just me. But I'm glad that you accommodated him to be on this show as well,
Well, you know how I knew this was meant to be today? This is what came in my mailbox today.
Oh.
Is the official general election voter information guide. So that was like a sign, okay, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And thank you both for the Vote Matters t-shirts. Very lovely.
Should have ironed them, probably.
Eric and Eric, what's going on over there?
Yo. 1, 2, 1, 2.
You comfortable in the kitchen over there?
Yeah. I'm okay in the kitchen.
Well, I realized tonight there's so many different directions that we could take this thing. So maybe I was thinking what would be best if we could just start out maybe a brief introduction of both of you and go as far or not as far back in your background as you want, and then how you guys got with The Vote Matters, and we'll jump off from there.
Yeah, the starting point for this channel was really, it started from when I graduated university. My university experience was tumultuous, in my opinion. I didn't really have the ability to express myself the way I felt that I should be able to express myself. And I witnessed so much division within, the young population. And coming out of university, it was very difficult to find a job. And I've always been so fascinated by the entertainment industry, and I've always kind of wanted to jump into it. And so, I was talking to my dad a lot about it. And he came up with the idea for The Vote Matters, where he's like, hey, let's do a political content channel. And at first I was very weary of doing that just because I saw how divisive it was, especially in university. So I was petrified of doing a political channel. But then, I think as time has continued to progress with this channel, it's opened up a lot more opportunities. I would not be on this podcast if I did not take a chance on mine. So I think it's big.
Yeah. And again, thank you very much, Sam, for allowing us to be here today. And when you think about one of the things that was very frustrating is when he was going through the university experience, the university experience for me back in the 80s is totally different than when he went through it. And one of the reasons was the whole COVID thing had happened. And that really was, I think, not a good thing when it came to the experience of what you should get out of the university level, right? And then when he gets out of the university and he's saying, well, I want to go into sort of the movie industry or into that sort of entertainment space, we had all of these strikes going on. I think the SAG had gone through a strike. I think the Directors Guild has gone through a strike. So there was all these things that were happening that were just sort of becoming what I can see. I heard him talking about it. I could see some of the frustration in his voice. And I said, you know what? Let's take this opportunity and let's just try our own podcast. At the worst case is you're going to get some experience about how to sort of set these up, how you can basically go about doing the editing, the filming, the equipment, and then basically putting together the content itself and then managing that whole aspect of it. And, to me, that's work-life experience, right? It's almost better than sort of going through a university itself to learn how to do these things. So I reached out to him and said, let's just do it. And it's been, the word he used, I think, was tumultuous. It was definitely tumultuous at the beginning. Yeah. There was definitely fisticuffs at certain points. He just did not agree with anything I wanted. And I just kept looking at him like, are you an idiot? Come on, what's going on here? And so we definitely had our moments where either one of us were going to quit just because we were just sort of not seeing eye to eye. And that's been a very interesting experience too, is to start coming together, starting to work through, and I'm not going to say through issues. These are issues that I think also stem from a father-son relationship. It's not just, it's content relationship. It's like, my dad's always pushing me, or you're not being my son. And you have to learn how to let go of those things, right? That I'm not dealing with my son. I'm actually dealing with my partner. And he's not dealing with his dad. He's dealing with his partner. And that's a really different mindset that takes a little time to get over that, right? We seem to live in a world where we want objects that we can relate to. So we think of son, father, or police officer, instead of looking at people for what they are, just sort of partners. We're in a world of partnerships. It really is what it is.
That's incredible. And how long has it been since you guys idea to where you're at right now?
I'd say officially a year.
Yeah, I think it's either this month, October, or November. I think it's November. So it'll be almost a year in November.
Wow, so just around the election, it'll be.
It was sort of one of the reasons I wanted to go down this path. I'm like, you know what? The election's coming up. It had already started to be a bit, let's call it a high-spirited sort of environment when it comes to politics. And it's only gotten so much better. People are like, well, that, all of the things that are going, yeah, but it's really entertaining. It is quite entertaining to watch all this stuff. It tugs at your emotions. It's like watching a 3-act play, living out in front of you. It's just amazing. This is one of the most amazing elections I think we'll ever see in our history. And to basically be trying to capture that sentiment and try to help with people understanding what is going on has just been sort of where we've been trying to make our focus, right? Put our energy.
Yeah. And I think you guys both do a really great job of bringing just the facts to the table, not making it a left or right channel, more of like, hey, here's the information. Here's what happened. I really like the video you guys did breaking down the RNC and the DNC. And saying like, hey, this is what they did good over here. This is what they did good over here. And it's so refreshing. And I was thinking, I'm like, wow, what if it was like this all the time? And we actually got to just get the information instead of one news organization be slanted this way and this one slanted the other way. And that's the only filter you ever get. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing in that regard.
I mean, we try our best. It's not always perfect, but, I think, because it's funny. You just said something that I think is really funny, because if every news channel went the exact same direction, I don't think you would have politics, to be honest, right? Everything would kind of just be a little too boring. We like a little excitement, a little chaos, not too much.
I have to agree with that. I think, people think like it's a very dishonest environment. But if you go back and read some of the papers back in like the 1780s or the 1790s, and you were just to swap out the name of, like, let's say Monroe and put in Trump, or swap out another name and put in like Kamala, you would think that was just like today's newspapers, you'd like, this is nasty stuff. But that's what they were doing back in like the 1780s, the 1790s. This is nothing new. The only difference between, let's say, the past and the present is just the platforms are more amplified, right? The content gets out there much faster. But it really hasn't changed when it comes to the evolution of how politics operates. It's just sort of, how does it operate faster? And that's what we're seeing in today's age. It just operates so much faster. So it just amplifies things so much more.
I love that you said that, because that actually brings me to one question I wanted to ask you guys and just get your opinion on. So to what you just said, they've been doing this for centuries. So everyone always says this is the most important election ever. Like, I think probably 4 years ago they said that. I'm pretty sure. Like, they're saying this one's the most important one ever. But I'm guessing maybe 4 years from now they're going to say that one's the most important ever. So what's your guys' opinion on that? Do you think this upcoming election is the most important ever, really? Or is it just, this is just how the game's played, but like you said, it's amplified because of social media? And
Well, I think, every election is the most important ever. If you don't treat it as something that's important, you're not going to give value to it, right? So, yeah, maybe it's skewed when they say certain things like, oh, this is the most important election ever, but you have to recognize that every election is important and vital. Whether it's the general election, the primary election, even local elections, you have to be present, especially at the polls, At least that's how I perceive it.
Yeah. I mean, so people are like, what makes this election the most important election? Is it because we feel government's out of control? They are now censoring, we had the whole, Twitter file gate or whatever, things like that. Are they stepping on our First Amendment rights? Are they trying to take our guns away? Is it not allowing us to have choices when it comes to our bodies? Things like that. When you look at history, and history is a great tell of a lot of things, right? We went through the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age is when we basically had these great moguls who came into power. This would be like Rockefeller. This would basically be J.P. Morgan. This would basically be Carnegie. These were the Vanderbilts. They all came into power, an immense amount of power, to where they had control over a lot of the politicians and they were dictating everything, sort of how it goes, right? And those elections were really important. In fact, from those elections came significant changes. But did they come quickly and right away? No. But does it make this election more important than those? No. It is important that we basically understand what our election represents. Back then, it was trying to say our elections was transitioning us from, let's say, an agricultural time into an industrial time. Today, you're basically transitioning from, let's say, a service industry into an information industry, right? You're basically entering into the digital age. So this is where I think a lot of the anxiety comes about, because people don't know what that means. What is the digital age? What does that represent for my livelihood? What does that represent for my children's livelihood? So is this election more important than the other? I don't know. But is it important to understand the context of this election? Absolutely. That I agree with.
when you say technology, probably in regard to AI.
AI is definitely one of the key things. AI, when I look at AI, and we had this discussion around
Yeah,
AI.
we talked about it for so long, but it made total sense, because even I was a little weary of it. But then once you break down kind of what AI is and how you should properly utilize it going forward, it's not as daunting as people make it out to be, right? It's more of it's like you have an extra teammate. So use it as a teammate rather than as competition.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that's really what it is. It is to enhance your ability to do things. So you can use AI to help in, let's say, editing or sound or whatever. It's not taken away from your creativity. It's allowing you to have more space for creativity, more time for creativity, not to diminish or to take away from who you are. That's not what I see in the AI industry. Where AI is scary is when you look at it from military applications. Then you start saying, okay, you people are nuts. But when you come to like industries, like when you're looking at like the service industry, the healthcare industry, entertainment industry, things of that nature, AI is just, I think, an additive, not a detractor from um, us having better lives.
Hmm. Now, I remember when I met you at Podcast Movement, if you remember that.
Oh yeah.
What was the place called? Wherever that was, down by
Oh,
the
you're
Staples
talking
Center.
like, yeah. My goodness, was it the Marriott, the JW Marriott
Yeah, it was right next to there. I met you
at the bar?
At the bar.
What
Oh.
a shock.
Well, it was so packed. Just to give people because there's all these podcasters in a room, and like we're moving. It's like wall to wall. It was packed, and then I remember, we get in conversation. I'm like, oh, what's your podcast about? You're like politics, and like I think you were the only one there that I met that was into this, and I was impressed, like at a young age being into it. Is that's one thing, and I remember having a conversation with you, and I'm bringing this up back again because I believe our local election hadn't happened too far away from when we had met. And I remember going into the local election booth thinking I knew everything and getting in there. I'm like, I don't know any of this.
Yeah.
And I'm transparent about that. And what it showed me is like, okay, this stuff goes deep. This stuff goes deep, and you can open this up right now and it's going to tell you, here's why you should vote for it. Here's why you shouldn't vote for it. And then I'll read both of them and I'll be like, well, I see their point. And I see their point. So I guess I'm opening it up to just because you say, the vote matters, like your vote really matters. But I think too, like having that ability to like be an informed voter and to know what you're voting for. And I remember you told me, and we had a conversation, you said the importance of local elections,
Yes.
because we always concentrate on,
Good job.
yeah, we always concentrate on who's going to be the president. And then no one cares for 4 years. But it's like, no, the local levels where stuff can really happen and change in your community. So I guess I'm just opening up to that, the local elections, before we probably dive into the national issues and everything.
Yeah, I mean, well, if all the national issues stem from the local issues, like within the local elections, it really determines how the national presence is going to be heard as well, right? And yeah, two Dos Equis and me, I'm going to be speaking about local elections all the time, but really, I took a lot of time to understand what the local election process was. It deals with school boards, your sheriff, city mayor, people that are really going to be taking care of your sole community, right? And you can't make great decisions unless your home is your home and you feel safe at your own home, right? Like all the stuff that's going on in this world that is really, like a travesty, it really stems also like there's no structure within the home, right? It just all begins at home. So by getting informed and doing all that stuff, it's about taking care of your community first. I think that's so vital.
Yeah. I mean, if when you think about local elections, they have an immediate impact on your life, right? So if you have people who are not going to take care of your sidewalks, make sure your streets are paved, make sure homeless people have the right places to live in, or basically take care of just basic necessities like making sure your electric grid is up to snuff, right? So it has immediate impacts on your lives. And so once you get your house in order, meaning making sure you get the right people elected to take care of your community, take care of your family, take care of what you think is going to be your relationship, right? Remember, everything I was saying before is about partnerships. Like ours is a partnership. Your partnership is also with your neighbors, your city, and then it expands out from there. So you have to have that partnership as your foundation, and it has to be good before other things start to get better. And if you don't, these national things, but the local ones are far, far more important.
Yeah, like there's a phrase I always think about when it comes to local elections is be the tide that raises all ships, right?
Yep.
And it's like a ripple effect. You drop a quarter in the pond, at first it's small, but eventually it expands. And that expansion, that's where you get to make real change.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I remember in physics, the guy would be like, raise your hand. I'm like, okay. He's like, do you know you just changed the world with that? just because you're moving air, and that air moves more air, and it moves it more air, and it moves it everywhere. You might not feel it, you might not know it, but the change has happened, and it is global. As simple as something as that.
I love that. And, we don't have to go into the pandemic, but I think during the pandemic in Los Angeles in particular, a lot more people started to care who their local officials were, because it was really the first time where decisions were getting made really quickly, and people are like, well, who's my city council? Who just shut down this, and that? But I think it was the first, and probably cities across America, but I know here probably especially.
Absolutely. When you start seeing things like defund the police, and there's not and it was just a slogan, and there's not like a very good thing to say, okay, if we defund the police, how are we going to manage those situations? Do we already have that in place, right? And a transition to something. Well, there was nothing. It was like, how can you defund this and not have something to sort of fill that gap, to fill that issue that you're trying to resolve? You just said this is causing problems, but okay, that problem didn't go away. And now you didn't have any way of addressing it. Maybe it's not the police. I'm fine with that. I just know that there was nothing in place to take care of the problem. It still persisted. And I'm like, okay, that comes from a local politician or a local board making a decision. And I'm like, okay. And the same thing when you were saying about COVID, right? I thought the way they managed COVID, and it's just, there was no conversation. There was no First Amendment rights when it came to that. People couldn't talk about it. They couldn't bring it up in podcasts because that got censored. You couldn't talk about it on a tweet because that got censored. It was like, wow, apparently the First Amendment doesn't exist anymore. And without the First Amendment, how can you basically have a dialogue, and how can you hold people accountable? Because now you don't get their ideas. You don't get to hear what they think. They are protected from us hearing what they really think because there's no dialogue. And that's where I got frustrated with it. It wasn't so much hey, it's a national security good, or it's a health concern, great. Let's have a conversation, as we're going through it. We just didn't. And that was very frustrating.
Especially when you start censoring other doctors.
Oh,
and people that are brilliant people, but if it doesn't fit the narrative, it's like they're canceled. They're done. They're
Yeah, cancel culture was an all-time high during that time period too. That's for sure. But
yeah, in fact, think about it. It was just like, it wasn't just a pandemic that came through. It was also this like inertia of I don't know if it's righteousness or whatever you want to say. People are like, if you don't get the vaccine, you're a traitor, or you're an evil, or it's like, wow, this is your neighbor. Really? This is how you want to basically be with your neighbor. Because after this thing, you're still going to be next to each other. But what is that going to look like, right? So you instead of having a conversation and really talking through these and trying to help each other, if somebody doesn't feel safe, find out why. Maybe you can change your attitude and change your way of being with them in order to make them feel safe. But if you just guilt them into things, that's just, that was awful. That was, I think to your point, it just felt like there's a lot of guilt trip out there. I was like, boo.
yeah.
It's a pretty crazy time. I've kind of pushed it in the back of my mind, but now that I start to, it was crazy time, like really crazy. And it reminds me, segueing a little bit here, I saw this clip. I don't know if you posted it. You may have posted it. It showed a clip of a presidential election, or I'm sorry, debate. That was you, wasn't it? Yeah, I went and clicked through. Was it Kennedy and Nixon?
It was.
It started with Kennedy, and I've actually watched part of that on YouTube before. It was like mind blowing because so professional, so complimentary of each other, and he would say his point. He would say his point. If there was a disagreement, it was like, hey, I don't agree. It was very civil. But then as you kept going through time, and then they go to present day, name calling and finger pointing and just craziness. So how did we lose that? When did that happen, in your opinion? Like, were we able to, whether someone was a Republican or a Democrat, even if they disagreed, they could still come together, for America. I think Nixon said, he goes, hey, we we both have the same goal. We just have different ways of doing it, I think is how he worded it. So do you know when that was lost?
I mean, it definitely did start, I would say, 2016. You know, that election between Trump and Hillary, that's when I saw the shift, right? That's when I saw the division really begin. Now, I don't really know too much on like the exact reasons why it happened. I mean, it could be technology, it could be the introduction to social media, it could be now that we are stimulated in a way that we receive information much more quickly, right? And we don't really sit down and take the time to understand exactly what's going on. Like our attention spans have just diminished tremendously. But it was during that election between Trump and Hillary that you see it just went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. You know?
It did. When you really think about when politics, being that I'm much older, and I hate to say that, much older. When you look at politics and when did it really start going to a point where people were looking more for a soundbite than for facts, right? And the Bush era, Bush Senior, I think was in a debate, and I think the person he was running against was Dukakis. Sorry, it was Dukakis. And in that particular campaign, you just heard Bush have these sort of one-line zingers, right? To just get those sound bites, get those headlines, and then he knew that was basically going to be splashed all over the papers, and everybody's just going to remember that one line. Nobody's going to remember what the content was about. And Dukakis actually had a lot of good things to say, and actually had a lot of good ideas that were just never heard because these zingers started just taking over. And it seemed that it just started to go up and up. And then to your point, when we get to the Trump era, my goodness, I mean, holy cow, you talk about amplification. It just went off the chart, and
yeah, I mean, he took it to another level. His slogans, and people still chant that stuff. Build the wall. That was like crazy.
Lock her up. It's just unbelievable. It's just the guy knows how to read an audience, right? And so he's almost like Barnum Bailey Circus, right? He just knows he knows how to read an audience, and I'm not going to say is Trump the best person to be our president. I just know that the guy knows how to read an audience, and he definitely knows how to get a soundbite. Just absolutely when it comes to this social media. It's like Reagan, right? Why did Reagan do so well? Remember we went and watched the movie Reagan?
Yeah.
And the guy's like, why did he do so well? Because he had acting background. He already knew how to
do it. Yeah, I mean, like with Trump, same thing. He already had a platform prior. You're fired. I mean, we all know where that comes from. We use that. We use that too.
And so these are people that had the mastery of media, right? They understood what a soundbite means. Like Reagan was fantastic when it came to soundbites because he'd always have these one-line. Here's sort of like if you ever do any clips about Reagan, he likes to tell a lot of jokes. And he likes to tell jokes about himself, or he likes to tell jokes about situations. He really never tries to demean people. He just tries to make fun of situations, like political situations or personal situations. But it was people like that, right? You're attracted to that kind of stuff, that people can make themselves feel vulnerable in a joke. Like if you can't laugh at yourself, nobody's going to ever laugh with you, right? If you can't understand the humor that it is your life, why would I ever take you serious? And so it seems like they have the mastery of understanding that, it's a show. It's all a show. We're under the big top.
I just pictured Trump like in a ringleader costume.
$100 you're going to see like a lot of memes with that. Got his hat, the tiger about to eat him.
I mean, he's got a dance already, dude.
He's got his dance. Oh my gosh.
And you know what? Hate or love that guy. Like he's funny. Like there's certain times where he just, like you say, he knows how to read a room. He knows those one-liners. I think too, he called Ted Cruz Lion Ted. And I was watching something from people in psychology backgrounds, and they talked about the power in that, in like the build the wall. It's simple. And it just repetition over and over and over. Similar to Obama and change. Like that was a great, that worked. Like it worked. It was simple. Change.
And Obama was genius because he ended up not only getting the change from, he did it in a demographic that was very important for the Democratic Party, right? Which is the Hispanic vote. And he had si se puedes, which is yes, we can, right? And that's a very popular chant. People know that. Like you say that, everybody's like, oh, Obama, right? So that cemented a large portion of the Hispanic vote for the Democrats just through that one little line, si se puedes. It was pretty genius, actually. Pretty genius on his part, that one line. Worked great.
And even him with his experience, he was a senator, correct? Like, was he only had served one term leading
No,
up?
I didn't even serve a term. He was like,
Really?
I believe he was, he hadn't served the full term. And then, he got got into the primaries, did well. And, he's a good looking guy. He basically has good swag. He can take and make a good joke. He has the ability to appeal to people, right? And that's huge. And he also has that sense of command, performance, presence, right? He knows how to control a room. He is the room when he comes on that stage. Like, can you remember anybody that ran against him?
Romney, right? In 12?
Hillary.
Hillary was actually an opponent of his.
That's right.
And he just mowed them down. Just mowed them down. And then Romney, boy, you talk about just stale. Boy, that was it's like, what is that? And he didn't have really good one-liners. He didn't really have command presence on stage. And I think that's the one thing. You might not think that somebody is the right person for the presidency by his history. Like he's only been in the Senate partially, wasn't even there the whole time. Prior to that, he was doing local politics and some other things like that. But that's not what a president's about, right? A president is a person that basically commands your attention, your presence. Like they are heard. When I look at today's candidates, I just see Trump is the more presidential. He might be a bit of a buffoon and things of that nature, but he definitely is more presidential than, let's say, Kamala. Kamala just does not come off presidential. I think that's where a lot of the debate, she might have seemed like she won the debate. She was more calm. She had the right answers, things like that. And we can get into arguments about was the debate fair or not. Doesn't really matter. I thought she did well, but did she come off presidential? And I just didn't feel like this is the person I want to lead my country. I think Hillary definitely comes off presidential. That woman is just tough. She's tough. I could see her being upset that she didn't make the presidency because she's tough, man. I could vote for her as president. I could see her having command presence. I just didn't see that. I just don't see that with the current candidate from the Democratic Party. I just don't.
I think that's a good segue into the current issues we're looking at that we're picking a president for. And before we started, you were telling me if we could go back to that, you were saying about the president, the aircraft carrier analogy.
Oh yeah,
you used. Yeah. Just painting the picture like it's really our congressmen and women in the Senate that are making these laws and lots of decisions, and basically the president's the one who signs off on it.
Yeah, they're the executive branch, right? The Constitution determines what the president can and cannot do. And when you think about the United States, right, and when we did that aircraft analogy, it's an economy of $30+ trillion. I mean, it's a massive economy. And that thing is moving, and whoever you put at the head of the state is not going to be changing that aircraft carrier very much through their 4 years of term. Maybe 8, but definitely not for 4 years. You could, everybody's like, oh, Biden's ruining the economy. Biden's ruining the country. I don't see it like disastrously we're doing it. It tilts this way or that way, but that's where an election comes in and you vote in somebody else. So it's just like an aircraft carrier. So do I put a ton of money into like, we got to get the right president? Yeah. Do I think we have to get the right mayor? More so. Do we need to get the right school board members? More so. Do we need to get the right sheriff? Absolutely. Those are far more important because those are ships that basically are much smaller and turn much faster in our lives and impact us much quicker. So, I'm not overly worried about what the president who gets elected. I'm more concerned about like local politics. I do think, well, you know what? I keep talking all the time. Like I said, he's like he told you, I can just ramble on and on and on.
Hey, I like to listen. I'm a big time listener. It's a skill set that I've learned to acquire. And I think that, when I speak to a way that's precise, concise, but hits the spot.
That's why he interviews me a lot of time when we do the podcast, right?
I was going to say, you guys have a very good dynamic because TS here is like the philosophical one, the one that's bringing up the questions, and then you're more the analyzer that breaks down the facts. And it's fun to listen and watch too. So you guys have good chemistry in that regard.
Yeah, like father, like son.
Who's the father? Who's the son? Like we said, it is a partnership, and we both bring strengths and weaknesses. One of my strengths is age. I've lived through a lot of things, so I know a little bit more on certain things. At the same time, that's a weakness because I get stuck in like, it's got to be this way. And he comes in, he's like, why? I'm like, what do you mean why? Right. And so we get into these arguments about like, I'm set in my ways in certain ways. And this podcast has helped me sort of knock off some of the barnacles, kick off a little bit of that calcium and loosen up a little bit and be a little bit more open to things. So that's been good too.
Well, and kudos to you guys for, I see the work you do. It's professional. It's high quality. I mean, kudos for just accomplishing that because Eric and I can echo this is hard work. Like podcasts and doing especially video format like we're all doing, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. No,
I'm sure you know.
Yeah. I feel it. No, I mean, it's all self-taught. Like, I do have to give kudos to myself on that one, too. It is self-taught, Like, there was not an ounce of knowledge on how to do any of this stuff. And then I just one day was like, okay, we're going to learn how to do this. And then I took, the amount of hours I've taught myself how to just do, like, basic Adobe applications, how to create logos, how to start understanding how social media works, how to start networking, how to just get people involved with a movement that is so divisive in itself. That's where the real trick is. That's the hardest part. For anybody that's trying to start any project, it's working with the right people. That's the hardest part. Everything else can be self-taught and managed pretty well, but it's the factors that you can't control that are going to stress you out the most. So as long as you're just disciplined in your craft, eventually you're going to run across somebody that's just as disciplined in the craft themselves. And then boom, you have something to continue and strive towards with somebody else alongside. And that's where the real magic happens, And like, I think that's kind of what we've been trying to do for so long. As much as we disagreed in the beginning, it also shows you that disagreement, it needs to happen. You are going to go through moments where you and your partner are not going to be on the same page, but you can't give up. You can't just sit there and be like, I'm done. It's over. Like, you don't get me. I don't get you. Like, we're not going to be compatible and work together. Like, no relationship is supposed to be easy. If it was easy, everybody would be content and happy, And as much as that was a stressful time in my life, it has set me up for success in the future. And I think this channel in itself, regardless of how well it does, for me, it's like, it's the origins of where I'm starting. And that's my ticket,
I love that.
It's a winning attitude right there. Like, yeah, beautiful. Yeah. You're going to learn by doing. You have to anyway.
It is.
Yeah.
There's the company I work at, they believe in it's called the 10-20-70 rule, right? And so 10 is you learn something. 20 is where you explore it. and 70 is where it becomes applicable to everything you do in life. And so that's how they sort of train us as we go through things. So they'll say, there's a new technology, learn what it is, explore how you're going to use that technology, and now start to use it through whatever we're doing with regard to that. So I find that that is a very applicable rule for a lot of things that we do. I do it for technology, but that's applicable to everything, writing or editing or anything. The 10, 20, 70 rule is a very good way to sort of look at things that it takes time, right? People think, well, AI is going to help me do it faster. No, it's not. It'll do certain things for you quickly, but it's not going to be, it takes time.
Yeah.
You need to learn it, explore it, then apply it. And the apply is so much time, right? They say to be a professional of anything, I mean, you have to spend anywhere from 4 to 10,000 hours. That's what it takes to be a professional of anything.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time.
And it's with anything too, right? Like, I mean, we can even talk about athletics or just learning English in itself. Think about how much time people have to spend in just learning their native tongue, right? It doesn't come overnight. I still remember the days when I was late and trying to figure out how to do like a spelling test, with 3-letter words. And I would just not be enjoying myself. But you got to crawl through the mud, man. You got to crawl through the mud.
It took a long time to teach you. It's not good, it's well. I did well. Kidding. Yeah, because he picked it up pretty quick.
Well, and I think to your father's point, like you post-college, what you've done with it, what better education to have than to be working on something for yourself and to be learning all these different, I mean, how many job hats are you wearing right now? We're all wearing
Plenty.
Entrepreneurship, you wear a billion hats, so I think I think you have definitely the right attitude of just like, hey, I don't know where this is going, but I know this is crawling through the mud. This is getting me to where I'm going to go next.
Well, like an interesting story I can give, and I think it's the mindset that I use going forward with this channel is, like, I've played water polo for 12 years now, right? And when I first started playing, I was a terrible swimmer, couldn't even catch a ball, didn't know any of the positions, right? And you just spend so many hours learning the fundamentals and the basics, treading water, getting your stamina up, learning your teammates' names, learning where they come from, why they're even playing the sport, then understanding why you're doing the sport, then how you're going to build relations with your coaches, what your coaches are trying to tell you, right? And then finally you can start playing your game, right? But you got to go through the fundamentals and learn to love the sport, even through the moments when you hate the sport. And then you start to formulate your own game. And from there, I think that's when the big transition happens, because then you start to realize you can become an ambassador for the sport as well, right? Because now you see the benefits. You learn the physical, the spiritual, the mental, and the social pillars of life. And that's through anything. It doesn't just need to be water polo. It can be applied anywhere. And you just want to become a coach yourself eventually. I mean, that's how I felt. And I know that's when I know I'm most passionate, is when I want to guide.
Well, we're doing a podcast. You're not coaching right yet. We're going to finish our podcast.
Well,
We need like our TVM. We're going to get through the election. Well, I think that's the other thing. It's like, when I mentioned like the 10, 20, 70 rule and like you're saying how you do that in life. Like the one thing I think right now is he had to learn a lot of stuff to get this up and running for us. And so I think we're still in the stage of sort of that 20 of exploration. I think we still haven't found quite the perfect avenues to go down. So we're still in that spirit of exploration. But yeah, so it's just like you're saying with water polo. Like right now, I think we're maybe in your third or second year, maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, the importance of that story is more so also like this is how you have to apply yourself to everything, right? Even with TVM, it may not be the thing that you end up doing, but it's something that's going to get you somewhere.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
So that mindset will carry with you, from your water polo to doing the Vote Matters. It's all connected.
I mean, it could even be applied to politics, for crying out loud.
Sure.
Like, you want to make a real difference, you got to put yourself in action. Take action. See what's out there. Go to a third world country and see what it's really like to live in an area that you have no voice. And then come back and you'll start to realize, okay, you know what? I took it all for granted. All of it.
Well, I think it's another thing that why we don't try to pick a side, right? And try to demean one person or one party over another is the reality is they stepped into that space. You might not like their policies, but they had the guts to go out there and say, hey, I want to be your congressman, or I want to be your mayor, or I want to be your sheriff, right? They put themselves out there. And that takes guts, right? And if you can't at least acknowledge that in that person, there's something more wrong with you than there is with them. And it just takes guts to be in politics today, especially when you start seeing things around how nasty it can be. How they go after not only you, they go after your family, they go after your relationships. And it's not just one side, right? It's a very, very tough industry. It's, when we hear about like the UFC is a blood sport, that's nothing compared to politics. Man, politics is a blood sport. Those people are ruthless. But to step into that space and to take it on and to try and say, I'm going to make a difference. I might not like certain politicians, but I will give them the credit due for what they are trying to, they're in there. They're doing it. And I'm like, you know what? If you can't acknowledge that, maybe you shouldn't vote. Maybe you shouldn't take it into consideration. Actually, I'm kidding. Always vote. But
Have you ever considered running for office?
me?
Yeah.
I consider running away from those things. No, I've never considered it.
What? Out of curiosity, why not? I mean, clearly you admire it. You have a strong interest in it. Is that just something you just don't have the time to allocate to or willing to, or just straight up don't think you would be a good fit for it? Or
So you brought him in for that leading question. Yes, I am going to be running for the governor of California in 2028. Vote for House 80. No, I just actually never really considered it.
okay.
It's never been something I considered. Doesn't mean I wouldn't consider it. Who knows? But it's really not. If I did, it would be local.
Yeah.
It would definitely be, maybe a city council, something like that, school board, something where I know I can see the results of my actions directly with the community I'm with.
No. And that's like the nice thing about Fullerton too, is when you look at like a lot of the people that are running Fullerton, like that's the city that we're from, they're all Fullerton natives and they're also
Yeah.
generational. Like it's like third generation individuals that are in office currently. Right? Like
Well,
you went to high school with a few of them.
I absolutely. What's funny is you go to restaurants, you'll see them there. You walk down the streets, you'll see them there. They're not people that have to shy away because they make, do they always make the best decisions? No. Do they make a lot of good decisions? Yes. Both pros and cons to everything, right? But they're part of the community. And I like that they're not going to back down from the decisions that they made. And they're not afraid to talk about those decisions. But the one thing I always warn people about is don't get overly passionate to the point where you get angry about a person's decision. Have a conversation with them. In fact, that's what city councils have, right? That forum where you can go in and talk to them for 3 minutes and where you can basically air your grievance or even inquire with them about why are they doing this, right? So take those opportunities to engage with them in a very positive way, right? I don't think it helps anything to name call or to do whatever. It just doesn't work. It just makes a person more entrenched about what I'm not going to talk to you. I can't trust you, or they're just going to go down their path. If you have conversations with them and you make them human, that makes you human. Humanize the conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, you got a great platform for it also. I mean, it'd be pretty cool to one day interview some of the city councilmen of like Los Angeles, Like podcasting, that's the beauty of podcasting, is now that's like the main focal point that I know I listen to whenever it comes to politics. I don't really watch mainstream news. I use completely different platforms to to really connect with the political atmosphere, right?
Because of that power of the long form conversation. Because, if you get Fox or CNN or whatever it is, like you get like how many minutes soundbite really quick and it's cut off, or interviews that they film for 7 hours and they show you 10 minutes of it type of thing, pick and choose. Whereas a podcast, long form, that's a whole other game, because people can only put on a front for so long, but being able to have those and get to know people better.
We were talking about that in the car up, where, it's good to have what I always call like a boilerplate sort of responses to certain things, because people want to know certain things quickly. But when you get to a format like this, that doesn't work, right? You can only give 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the boilerplate, and then it becomes, okay, either you're a deer in the headlight or the authenticity of life starts to stream out, right? And so that's what you're hoping for, is that authenticity. That's what everybody wants. I mean, that's literally what everybody wants. That is the shining star that we all look for, is to see authenticity. And so when you see some people that are really willing to engage and just get out there with the people and talk with the people, politicians or whoever, because it's the long format, regardless if it's in a podcast or they're just out there stumping, right? It starts to get to that authentic aspect of who they are.
And I really like what you said about, even if it's someone that you disagree with, the fact that they're running and putting in the work, that has to be respected.
Absolutely.
Too. And I'm having more of the mindset now too, like, hey, even if I voted for someone and they don't get in and the other person gets in, like, okay, well, I'm rooting for you. Like I'm legitimately rooting for you because you won. I hope you're for team, our city or team America or team California, whatever it is. I think it's a more healthier approach. Like, I don't know. So I'm glad the way you said that, it really opened up. Like, yeah, it's just coming with people with more respect instead of just instant slander and headlines. And
yeah, it doesn't open that just doesn't lead to anything positive.
yeah,
Right.
it's a dark energy too.
Yeah. And that's not just in politics. That's like, there's people that want to be your union leaders, right? Let's say if you're part of the SAG or if you're part of the Directors Guild, they have elected officials that the body nominates, and, they took and put themselves out there. Now, do they do the best job? I don't know. That's for you to determine the next time you elect an official, right? But you have to respect that they actually were willing to do it. They stepped into that space and they wanted to basically help their community. And I absolutely do give respect to all politicians and people that do that. Do I have to always agree with their policies? Absolutely not. Can I vote them out of office? That is the whole point of the vote matters. If you like them, keep them in. If you don't, vote them out. That's the beauty of it, right? Does it mean that you hate them? No. It just means you vote them out.
No.
And now I think it's time. We're nice and warmed up. Issues.
There's issues.
There's a few of them.
Few.
I guess I'll start with, I really, really liked your guys' video on the border crisis. And it's one of the best explanations to what's going on, and then also how it's way more complicated than what either side will make you think. So I'll open us up there because I know that's a huge issue going into this election, presidential on November 5th. So what's your guys' take?
Well, the border in itself is another form of what we call political tribalism. I'm pretty sure that you've heard us use that term tremendously all the time, scattered in all our videos, but political tribalism is when they use specific key elements to divide and create two different groups, and they're going to clash over what's right and what's wrong. The border crisis is a prime example of that, right? Now, I mean, in the podcast, we talk a lot about how it doesn't necessarily just stem from the presidents, but it stems from, like the peeling of the onion, right? It's an exposure to the fact that politicians make so much money off of immigration and just how the border is handled. So yeah, realistically, and it's the saddest truth, but they're going to continue to use it to gain more votes, to gain more money, but they're never going to fix the issue, right? Because they make too much money from it. So why would they get rid of it?
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about the border, I think the other piece that's really funny is we think about like Trump's going to put up a wall. Well, you saw like Trump had all these executive actions and he was going to put up a wall. Well, guess what? Biden came in and he undid those executive actions and he can undo those walls. So that's not a permanent fix, right? The only way you fix a border is through Congress. You hold the legislative body accountable for what is going on at the border. And if you think about it, they love that it's being sort of at the executive branches where this is being discussed instead of really where it should be discussed with your congressmen and your senators. They are the ones that control what the executive branch can do and force, if they want, that border closed. But to exactly what you said, they don't want to do that. There's too much money and political benefit from having an open border, right? Let's say you're a candidate and you're on the border. You could sit there and say, oh, these people up in Washington, they're awful, regardless if they're Democrat or Republicans, and you need to have me in office because I'll close the border. Well, he can't close the border. Only the party, the legislative branch, can close it. So he has to be one of out of 452 or whatever number it is. So just one person ain't going to be able to close the border. The president can't really close the border. And it's just, it's it's a terrible game they play. It's a very dishonest game they play. And the people that suffer the most from such games are the local communities again. You think about kids went through COVID and couldn't go to school. So they lose a year and a half to 2 years of education by not being in the school system, right? Then you inundate those schools with hundreds of thousands of young kids who no longer speak English that need to be taught. And the schools are overwhelmed. So these kids are now getting even less of the education that they deserve. Then you also have these other kids that are trying to get educated. So the educational system is now really just broken. The kids are not getting educated the way they want. Then you look at the healthcare system and how it's being inundated. All of the, let's say ERs, right? They're just basically overwhelmed because they don't go to, like when you get sick, where do we go? What are these? I forget what.
Oh, like urgent cares?
Yeah, we go to urgent cares, things like that. But they, most of the illegals just go to the hospital and they go to the emergency room. Like if you go into certain areas, that's all you'll see. And the doctors are overwhelmed, the nurses are overwhelmed. And so that when real sick people come in there, one, they're not getting the care that they should get. Two, hospitals are the worst places for people to go because that's where you're going to get sick. You're already sick going in and you're going to get sicker because hospitals have germs. They have all these, different types of things that people are ill with. And you think you're going to come out of there unscathed? Nah. So that's another problem there. And then just the impact on other social services is also very draining. And who benefits? In the end, who benefits? It's mostly businesses, right? They're the ones like I'm the farming industry. So big pharma, they'll benefit from it. The agricultural industry will benefit from it. The entertainment industry benefits from it. The healthcare industry will benefit from it because it's cheap labor, right? They're trying to make a buck. And the politicians won't do anything about it because we have a thing called special interest groups who basically will go to these politicians and wine and dine them and give them tons of money so that they can get reelected. So why would they bite the hand that feeds them? So you want Congress to fix it, but the big business that basically manages their campaigns doesn't want Congress to fix it. So who is Congress going to help? The citizens, us? Or are they going to help the big industries that are giving them all the money to get reelected? Clearly, we get the short end of the stick. Our kids get the short end of the stick. the healthcare industry, meaning a lot of elderly people and people that are ill, get the short end of the stick when it comes to this kind of stuff. And why? Because our politicians are addicted to money and they need that money to run. What do we say it costs to run to be a congressman?
$120,000 a month
That's how much it costs just to run.
just to run. And
Just
so,
that doesn't even guarantee you elected.
but that's also why they sell their soul, you know, like they there's literally that phrase, selling your soul, right? Because how are you supposed to get that much money without getting donations, right? But the problem is once they get these donations, they have to create their whole campaign based around the people that are giving them the donations. They may not even be like, they'll be like, oh, like in their mind, they may think I'm against open borders, but because I'm getting money from people that are pro open border, I need to shift my entire campaign.
And there's no term limits on Congress people, right?
Oh, there is every 2 years, but if you're an incumbent, meaning you have got elected, the power of an incumbency is tremendous when it comes to elections. So it's hard to get an incumbent out from a Congress to a senator, really hard. It's just they're already part of the machinery of politics. They can get through the primaries pretty easy. And usually when it comes to getting already elected, their party is already in a pretty good position within the state that they're running in. So it's hard to get rid of incumbents. Very difficult. To exactly what you were saying about, it takes $125,000 to run as a congressman every month. And so that means they have to earn something like $3 million in 2 years in order to win their election. What do you think it takes to run as a senator?
A lot more.
It's almost $375,000 a month is what they have to raise.
And the other thing on it too, and like it's the other part that I didn't take into consideration, they still want to make profits, right? So $120,000 turns into a little bit more than per month, right? But that's what I'm saying. They're selling their soul for the wrong causes.
Yeah, it is amazing the amount of money that's in politics. So when you look at a problem like the border, which is just it's like what they say, these are signs and symptoms of a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is the amount of money that is in politics. Like when you look at, let's say, 2016, like, the Trump, the Hillary campaign thing, right? That was almost $16 billion that went into that election. $16 billion. Do you know how much $16 billion is? If you were to stack a lot of ones on top of each other, you know how high that goes? That's almost like 3,000 miles high. That's how much money went into that election. Crazy. Crazy amount of money. For what? Person to just stick on an aircraft carrier that's just going to go like this anyways. It's absolutely amazing. And what you could have done with that money at the local level to really sort of not in the sense of hiring the right election or get the right people elected, but just from like the services people need, to improve people's lifestyles, to basically make neighborhoods better. That money I think has a greater value if they would start to make it less national and more local.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of, I forget what the case was in 2012. There was a case that went to the Supreme Court. And in this case, the corporation was saying, hey, they have the right to redress Congress. Now, what is redress Congress? Where does that come from? So in our First Amendment, there is the right to redress Congress as a citizen. This means you get to go to them and say, hey, what's going on, right? I have grievances. I have an issue. And we need to talk about how do we resolve this issue. And so it's there for citizens to do that. But what happened in 2012, I believe that's the year. Well, we could look it up later. The Supreme Court said, hey, corporations have this right as well, that they can redress grievances with Congress. Well, how do you think they redress grievances with Congress? This is the whole scam of special interests. This is where they get to throw a party and they call it their First Amendment right to redress their grievances as they give them a lavish dinner, some lavish vacation in which they are redressing their grievances and saying, hey, we'll help you get reelected. It put the corporations in a position to undermine the citizenry of this United States. One of the first things that needs to get fixed, if we really want to take the money out of politics, is to have that reviewed by the Supreme Court again and to be readjusted, that corporations should not have the ability to get redressed or have the base. I think it's called, like, they can address grievances with the government in the First Amendment. And until that's resolved, special interest will be king in our government, at least at the national level.
The puppet masters, as we like to call them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of that pain comes from.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Congress people, they can play the stock market and be involved in all of that, correct?
Sure, that's all part of the whole, like, do as I say. What is it? Do
Rules
as I
for-
say, but not do what I don't do. Whatever. What's the rule?
Rules for thee, not for me. type of-
Exactly. Oh man, you talk about just absolute horrible people when they do that. Like, think about. I don't like to pick on one particular person, so I'm not going to say her name. But this person goes into Congress, and really impressively, had to take on an incumbent to do this of the same party. So she won the primary against an incumbent, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. So you got to get kudos there, right? And very strong with social media, understood the power of it, and used it to her advantage to get into Congress. Now, I don't think this person understood, like, the benefits of being a congressperson, but now that person is basically, think about what a congressperson makes, what, 180,000, and then they have an allowance for all of their staff and their housing, some other things. So maybe a couple $100,000. That person today, after being in office for maybe 4 years, is worth almost $30 million. All through the market, the stock market, knowing, because, hey, when I pass this legislation, it's going to benefit this company, and I'm going to long these companies, and it's going to tank these companies, so I'm going to short those companies. And that is not considered insider trading. Now, if they tell somebody outside of Congress what's going on, and that person benefits, then that's illegal, right? That's insider trading. But if they themselves do it, not a problem.
So that explains when they come in, they're worth basically nothing, and they walk out, they're worth millions and millions of dollars.
Absolutely. And this is where special interests, how many of the laws do Congress people and senators write? Like, do you think they sit there and they have their staff day and night? Oh, we got to pin this. The bulk of the legislative stuff that comes through is basically written by special interest and just sort of given to them. Say, this is what needs to pass. They'll peruse it. They'll see if it's good, makes sense. But for the most part, they're going to pass it.
But it's like a stack of papers too, right?
Oh,
like
gosh,
it's not even just like, oh, here's a folder.
That's
It's like 500 pieces of paper just topped off on a desk or something like that.
Yeah, what was it? You got to give it to Nancy Pelosi. It's, like I say, I might not like a lot of things that woman does, but she has the guts to do it. I'll give her that, man. She's a tough dog. And so at the end of, I think it was the last session before the Republicans took over, right? They had what they call an omnibus package that they wanted to pass. Now, what is the value of an omnibus package? So an omnibus package is just putting all the legislative into one package, and then you vote on the package. And everything in there automatically gets approved, right? And it's going to have all the good stuff, and it's going to have all the bad stuff for all of the Congress people, because then the congressperson can say, I did this for you, and they can point to that one sliver of paper that's in that omnibus to say, see, this is what I did for you. In reality, they also passed all this other garbage. They don't bring that up, but and these omnibus packages, unbelievable. If you ever see the video from Rand Paul, I love that guy. The guy cracks me up so many times. He took the omnibus package and stood it up next to him. Now, he's not a very tall person, right? And this thing was already like past his waist.
Jeez.
And it was given to them 5 days in advance to review before they had to actually pass it.
No one's reading that.
I might get, I mean, if you want to go to sleep, it's great. Right.
Mhm.
But yeah, exactly.
It reminds me, there's a book I read. It's over there somewhere, but it said how a congressperson, once they get in, I may have this wrong, but somewhere upwards to 80% of their time is immediately spent trying to get reelected.
That's it.
The other 20, maybe they're going to do the stuff maybe they said they were going to do, but the second they get in, they have to start raising money again to keep getting elected and staying there. And
so, yeah. So think about it also like,
Well, it kind of reminds us a little bit of like how judges are appointed as well, right? Like that first
Oh,
half
yeah.
process is all about like schmoozing their way in, right?
for like Supreme Court or
all of it.
Mhm.
All of them.
I'm not as familiar with that. Could you guys break that down?
Sure. So think about like, well, I'll let you, since you brought it up.
I'll try and do my best, but so basically what it is so a judge is either appointed, but they have to get like a referral to get like appointed, right? And so for the first half of a judge's career, all it is kind of schmoozing to the person that they or the person that's going to appoint them, right? And that's going to give them that referral and say, okay, this person is fit for the job. The problem is generally when a judge is, or like a judge that's not a judge quite yet, right, is going through the process, they become very biased because generally these people that are the ones that give that referral, they're either Republican or they're Democratic, right? So a judge is never going to take a case that is going to really be conflicting with Republican ideals or Democratic ideals, depending on who is going to be like referring them, right? And so that first process of becoming a judge is schmoozing their way into the position. But then once they get that position, it's more about the integrity of the law. It's just everything that goes into it prior is the most difficult part.
Yeah. For the most part, that's true. Yeah. Think about it like at the federal level, to his point, you have to get appointed. And the appointment then has to go through Congress, in this case, the Senate, to get approved. So you have to get appointed, and the appointments come through the president. So you have to be either, if it's a Democratic president, a Democrat. If it's a Republican president, a Republican. So you already have these political ties. So judges already have a lot of deep ties to the political parties. This is why, like when people, let's say we had the 2020 election, right? And you go to court to say, hey, look at all these problems I have seen in the election, and let's get the courts involved and get this resolved, right? What did almost like 90% of the judges say? None of them want to deal with that, honestly, because they don't want to get into politics. That's not their space of comfort, because they got into office on politics and they don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. So they just want to avoid it. So they'll always say, you don't have standing. Oh, you don't have standing. Oh, you don't have standing. Oh, you don't have standing. And on and on. And so eventually the cases just disappear because you don't have standing. You're like, I got disenfranchised. How can I not have standing? I don't know, but you don't. And there it goes. So when it comes to things around elections being part of the judicial process, really difficult, just because judges don't want to get involved in these things, right? It was really hard to watch these judges do the things, I think, when you saw some of the lawfare that was going against Trump. Now, people might say, well, he deserved it. Maybe he does. What I don't like is that there's a term, and it's called sophistry. I don't know if you know what sophistry is. Okay. Sophistry is when you rationalize the irrational. Politics is filled with sophistry. Everybody rationalizes the most irrational things, right? Oh, he deserved this and that. And we're going to rationalize the irrational because that's the way it makes sense to me in my mind. But when you really think about it, they were disenfranchising a lot of Americans who want to know about that candidate, but that person stuck going through law cases and having to go into court and not being able to basically speak their mind to those people. So what happens through lawfare is you basically disenfranchise a lot of people when you do these around elections, unless it is absolutely like that person did something seriously that needs to go before the court. Just try to avoid it. It just makes no sense to me. And I think that's also why one of the candidates have been looked at, not because, hey, he's a great orator or because he's got great ideas or because of this, but I think they see the system as sort of stepping out of line. And they're like, okay, you stepped over the line and you seem to be favoring the machine, not so much one person or one party, because it's really a lot of times a uniparty and it's a machine. That's how it operates. And so this one person was being punished by the machine. And so a lot of people are like, okay, I'm voting for that person because that person is sticking it to the machine. He's exposing the machine. And I'm sick and tired of being used by the machine. And so that's why I think the momentum is behind one of the particular candidates, not because this person in and of himself is great. It's what he represents from a standing of the machine is being too abusive. It isn't listening to me anymore. It's only wanted to listen to special interest. It's not doing what's best for my community. I'm tired. I'm angry. I want a different way of existence. And so if this is my only chance, I'm going for it, right? And so that's what you see. It's not, hey, he's got the greatest message. It's a nice slogan. I like some of the slogans. They're pretty good. But I think it's all about sort of what he represents.
I'm assuming we're talking about Trump.
Yeah,
do you think that's necessary for the progression of, fixing some of these problems? Because I believe that this might be wrong, but I believe like when they wrote the, the Bill of Rights and everything, the Constitution, they're like, hey, 300 years, you guys should revisit that. That's always a rumor I heard, is like the guys that actually wrote it are like, hey, this is probably should be good for about 300, but after that, you guys should definitely revisit it. So do you think this is kind of necessary to us kind of cleaning up some of the corruption or just the money from the corporations?
So what's the beauty of if you think about like the Constitution and our Bill of Rights, it's a growing organism, right? It started off with 10, we're up to 25, right? And we can always add more. If it's the consensus of the people, it's the will of the people, you can add more amendments to clean it up, right? And you can take ones away, like we had the whole thing about prohibition, right? It was added and it was taken away. So it's a growing organism. You can sort of glean it as needed. So yes, we always should have a thought about improvements and moving things in the right way. So one of the things I think, like Trump was saying about abortion, it really is a national debate. It is something that probably needs to be brought up on a very large scale, not determined by some low, the Supreme Court, based on some cobbling together of various amendments to say, well, these things represent the right of abortion. Instead, why not have the different states get people to basically voice their opinion through the election, and then those governors can basically come to the Senate and say, ratify a new amendment that basically permits, if this is what we want, abortion. And then it's done. Right? This is actually one of the things I think in some of the topics and like writings of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she didn't really like Roe v. Wade because she thought the momentum was already moving in that direction. That they were taking it to the governors and they were looking to do an amendment versus trying to do it through the Supreme Court, which is sort of funny because she became a Supreme Court justice. But there are certain things where she talks about that, or at least it's mentioned about that. And it's pretty interesting. I'm like, she thinks that would have been the better way to go. So yeah, to your point, I think we should get rid of institutions? Do I think you can remodel things? We've done that a lot of times. Like think what happened after 9/11, right? They said, oh, we're going to get rid of these institutions and we're going to create Homeland Security, right? And they created this whole new government agency out of that to protect us, right? And what has happened to that agency? It's done a lot of stuff to protect us, but it's also done a lot of stuff to gather information. It took certain aspects that used to be what you would consider like part of the NSA or part of the CIA that were turned outwards and looked at foreign entities and were turned inward to look at us.
Does like the Patriot Act and stuff
Yeah,
like that?
all these types of things. So this is
Yeah,
where
it'd be like the corruption that we're trying to eradicate. Those are the guys that be writing the new rules. So it's like you're basically saying it wouldn't really work.
well, so like we had a discussion around like we like RFK Jr. I thought he seemed very moderate. Seems like he's a traditional liberal, and he's all about blue collar workers, middle class, grow America. And how did that turn out for him?
Yeah, kicked off the ticket, man. Boom, gone.
Yeah. And so if you think about it, like the Democratic Party has basically taken the power out of the people. They didn't allow the primaries to happen. They didn't allow us to have RFK Jr. They just said, hey, we're going to stick with Joe until we don't need Joe. And then we're going to throw this person in there. A person that was not done through the primaries, a person that was not really elected other than through super delegates. If you guys, I don't know if you understand the whole thing about the Democratic Party and the delegates and the super delegates. So they break them into two pieces, right? So the delegates are what people in the states have, right? And that's how the Republican Party works. It's all delegates. So you can get so many delegates here. But the Democratic Party has this special group of people called super delegates. It's about 20% or 25% of all the delegates out there. And these are like people who are political members of the party. And so these are people that can basically they basically are the ones that gave Hillary Clinton the nomination versus Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was getting everything when it came to all of the, delegates, but he got 0 super delegates.
Bernie kind of got screwed twice, right?
Yes, exactly. So the system on the Democratic side, because of these super delegates, is a little bit rigged. It's sort of,
They basically pick the candidate, right?
Yeah.
Without having the people get an opportunity to pick the actual candidate they want.
So it doesn't matter how good a person like Bernie was doing. If they get to the super delegates, you're like, yeah, no, we still don't want him.
We prefer Hillary,
That's right.
So.
So they always have that in their back pocket. So let's say if Joe Biden, the reason they didn't want Joe Biden out on the campaign trail is, and we know, right? Sleepy Joe it's a very good expression, and let's say, and you don't want him because then everybody knows the jig's up. Come on, it really, and so it's hard to then vote him in office. So we did a what was it called, the conspiracy?
The coup.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Very well done, by the way.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So it's about how they it was a coup d'etat, right? It's not a coup d'etat, it's just a coup, where they basically snuck in their candidate, not by the vote of the people, but the party brought in Kamala, right? And then they threw all the money behind Kamala, and then, she becomes their candidate, not the people's candidate. Special interests, big pharma, big ag, big business, their candidate.
But aren't they concerned about winning the election? Wouldn't they want the people's candidate, or are they just banking on the fact that they're just going to vote for that party no matter what?
So they are, I think when it comes to the people, I don't think they trust the people because they don't know if the people are going to do what's in their best interest, right? And that's where they sort of think about why they wouldn't want RFK Jr., right? That guy seems pretty stand up. He's already been out there trying to fight the good fight about
He's so anti-corporation.
Oh yeah, all of the
He's fought him for years as a lawyer. Yeah.
About the environmental stuffs, about all of the juicing they put into the animals, the food, all that kind of stuff. He's out there trying to say, hey, we should be healthier people. Like you look at pictures of the 1920s, the 1930s, everybody's skinny, right? You look today, man, yeah, exactly. We puffed up a bit. we're basically walking around just sort of, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Well, I mean, his family passed too. I mean, he's got what, his father and his uncle both.
yeah, I mean, they've given, their life's blood to this nation. You might like them or not like them, but you that's pretty impressive. When you think about the two things that tug us one way or the other in life, right? There is always the fear of death and the desire to live. Those are the things that tug us one way or the other. And everything else comes from that. Like, you ever seen in the thespian masks, like you'll see the one mask with the smile and the other's mask with sort of, it's not a frown, but it's sort of like a grimace. It represents fear and death, or fear and desire. That's what that represents. And the idea is, once you get rid of your fear of dying and your desire to live, you could be whatever you want. That's why actors try to ultimately get rid of those fears and desires in order to become the character they need to become. They, in essence, let that certain portion of their ego die in order to become the role that they need to be.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, you told me that you've done acting like for, I don't know, like a long time. I remember we spoke.
7 years, about
Yeah. I mean,
7, 8 years.
would you say you could relate to that?
About having to eradicate fear and death,
Yeah.
or fear and
Well, we were talking
Eric's-
about this earlier with another guy down the street. He was an actor with us as well. But yeah, we were discussing how you having fear, you the actor, you wanting to do good, not screw up and like just do well. You are creatively cutting yourself off from like your life source and spontaneity and everything else because you are so consumed by your own ego fear of doing well. So yeah, I would agree to that, as just in the sense that you got to get rid of that shit and just kind of be as present, as kind of the term like that gets tossed around a lot in our acting communities. Be as present as possible. That way that way you can play. That way you can jump in the imagination and you can be this character and stuff. But a lot of it's internal work of just getting out of your own way as the actor before you can even step foot and trying to be free in front of this camera and then start manipulating your emotions and stuff like that. But it all stems from this fear of like needing to do good, which is the main reason most people want to be an actor, because they want to be validated. They want to feel loved and desired by a lot of people. So it's a very interesting thing. But yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Oh, love acting. Big fan. Big fan.
Oh, I have a huge ego, so I could never be an actor. But what I do find in politicians, have to have that same skill set. They sort of have to get rid of the fear and desire in order to do what they need to do. If they don't, then they become very like, and I'm talking not like what I'm talking about. There's a rare breed. Like the Kennedys are a rare breed because they didn't have the fear and desire. They were just going to do what they needed to do, and that's what I was trying to get to with like the Kennedy family. They, a lot of politicians can't, and because they either have a desire or a fear, they can be easily manipulated one way or the other, right? I desire to live, so I want to live well, so I'll take the money. I'll short the stocks because I can, instead of just having integrity or morality. But there are breeds of people who just get into politics and are willing to take a chance. They might die, but they're still going to do it. And that was one thing when I saw Trump, the assassination, and that guy standing back up and just sitting there, fight. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, that is not the thing I'd be doing at that moment. I'd be like, more Secret Service on top, please. It's just amazing that, and he goes out there and puts himself in front of it again. So, and Kabbalah does the same thing, right? These are not 100% safety zones. None of it is. As much as you might think they got all these Secret Service, it's still a risk.
It's humans.
That's right. And to go and do that it's it takes a lot. It takes a lot, right? And even people who, I might not like them as politicians, when they go out there and they stump and they actually put themselves out there, I got to give it to them. It takes a heck of a lot of guts because you don't know if you have a target on you or not, especially in this day and age. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if you focusing on that, you'd probably just be paranoid, and your life would just deteriorate. Yeah, so those guys probably, like you're saying, completely get that out of their head just so they can carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, they might not do what we want them to do. But again, I'll give them credit for it takes guts. It takes guts, right? Nothing's safe in politics because at some point you're going to have to go into an auditorium. You're going to have to basically be out in the public. You're going to have to talk to your constituents. You're going to have to validate to them why you're doing what you're doing. And you never know what you're going to see when you do that. And so that's another reason I'm not like, all yippee and let's I'm running for it takes guts. So I'll give him that credit too.
Yeah, and that was actually I did watch your guys' Trump assassination video. My personal take was just interesting watching that because what's that? It's been 2 months now since that happened. It's amazing how quickly that's not talked about or it just went away. Meaning, like, I don't think people understood, and I people on social media making jokes and people, it's the thing of the day, then they're on to something else. It's like, I think social media is also, even though it's given us this broad view of the world, I think it's also desensitized us a lot. Like, we think everything's TV. And I don't think a lot of people, whether you were for him or against him, understood the consequences if those millimeters that would have connected and he would have been dead. Like what the country could have looked like in that situation. That's just my personal take.
No, 100%.
I don't think a lot of people understood the gravity of what they saw. Like, do you guys understand?
Well, that's
last time we saw that was JFK, really. When we saw that one, but
or Reagan too.
Reagan had his attempt, yeah.
But that's just like an extreme form of, like, when the emotions have boiled up and someone takes an extreme action, right? And yeah, that chaos ensues, of course. And if the bullet had connected, then man, we're gonna fall into chaos. I think that's when you really start to wonder how strong this political tribalism is gonna fuel then. But to your point, it got taken off of the news real quick, but it's also because Joe Biden stepped down a week later. And that was in the news for much longer. I don't know if you noticed, but with the Trump assassination, they talked about it for 48 hours. With Joe Biden dropping out of office, they talked about it for 2 weeks. So it's more of a prolonging of it, right? It's like they don't really want to talk about stuff of that nature. They don't want to have it become like a Democrat-Republican war. Because war is not, that's just not what they want. Because if that's what path it is that we would go down, if that bullet had connected, then it's not even in the benefit of the politicians,
Well, and to the point of the circus analogy, it is amazing when you are watching it from far, the Trump assassination happens, and then, Biden steps down. It's like it keeps going back of, oh, everyone's over here, now they're over there. And then it's, oh, now Kamala's running. But then right as they had the fire of the DNC, next day RFK joins Trump. But you knew it was strategic though, because he did it the day after. So they didn't have their big platform to rebuttal that. He waited till they were done, then he jumps. So it's amazing. It's not all by accident. Like when you're watching this, there are like the puppeteers.
That's a chess
on
game,
both
man.
sides.
It's just a chess game of who's going to be in check.
Yeah.
You just keep on putting people in check, like nonstop, right? Force them to make a move that is going to expose their weakness. Like that's just politics in a nutshell.
Well, the brilliance of this sort of election cycle is how it's been crescendoing, right? It just keeps ramping up and it just keeps ramping up and it just keeps ramping up. It's just insane. And now we get into October, and everybody knows about the whole October surprise. So, oh my gosh, what could you bring on? What else? What else can you layer on this cake? Come on. But it's coming. And everybody's just waiting, right, with bated breath. It's like going to NASCAR, right? You see those cars coming, and those last 10 laps are coming, and that's when all the wrecks happen. You're like, here it comes, and boom, there it happens, right? And so we're sort of rounding into those last 10 laps where it's coming. Something's coming. We had an assassination. We had a guy got thrown out of office. We had RFK. We had Kamala. Oh my gosh, what else can there be? Lawfare, traces. Oh, it's just crazy. It's they say life is absurd. Boy, they're so true. It's so true. It's great.
I heard somewhere, I don't know the exact time. They said like the last 12 weeks leading up to the elections, like the equivalent of 10 years. Because so much can happen and go down. And so what are some of the other issues in your guys' opinion that are the biggest going into these? We talked about the border crisis. I know a lot of people, economy. And that's actually one thing I've been thinking of lately, because people go, oh, well, Biden's the reason I'm poor and Trump will make it better, and vice versa. Does the president have that much control over an economy on the way it's going to go?
So think about it, like what the president can determine when it comes to the economy is winners and losers. But the economy is going to be the economy, right? So if he says, I'm going to deregulate so you can have more industries in the United States, great. If you regulate, it just means the industries go outside of the United States, but the industry continues, right? So the economy from a global perspective doesn't really change very much. It's just, what do you want in the United States and what do you want outside the United States? So from an economics perspective, they can have some impact on our GDP, but right now it's a global economy. It's hard for the president to really impact the global economy. So not so much. But when you ask me, like, what is the biggest concern going forward with the election? And this is what we were talking about in the car as we were coming here, right? Is all around election integrity. Right? So, like, but, we were talking about that for, like, what if you felt that your vote, well, like you were disenfranchised because they didn't count the votes right, or they didn't do the right due diligence to make sure the votes were counted correctly, that they made sure that there wasn't fraud, that they made sure that the voter rolls were accurate, that they made sure that people basically showed proper ID when they voted, that they made sure the ballots just didn't go to anybody, that they made sure that there was basically proper mechanisms to create a sense of custody, validity, and accountability when it came to the election cycle, right? And that's, to me right now, the 2020 election was such a sham. Not in the sense that there was illegal votes, or it was the sham of the integrity of how that was run was poorly done. And I'm hoping that this cycle we have far greater integrity and trust in our vote. That it's just not going to anybody that can sign a piece of paper and bring it back in, and we got to trust that they were on the voter roll and trust that their signature matched, and trust that we shouldn't have to trust. It should be validated, verified. It should be part of a mechanism to make sure we are enfranchised and we can basically know who our elected official is. Might not be the person I voted for, but I know that it was a proper vote that got that person into office, and therefore I will respect the will of the people. But if I don't have that, then I don't have elections. And the vote then doesn't matter.
That was well said.
No.
Yeah, kind of. If that's not in place, then it all doesn't. It's all predetermined. It's all.
That's right. It's all done by the Illuminati.
Yeah.
That's right.
When going outside of the country, so another question, just to get your opinion, like, what Do you feel the right president can stop some of these wars globally?
Well, I think we talked about that one in the car also, right? A strong leader will generally cease most of these dilemmas that are occurring outside, right? I think, like, I don't really want to go too deep into it
Sure.
because personally I have a hard time when it comes to the concept of war. I think, me personally, if I was in a position of authority, like, this would not be happening. There's no way. People should not be getting killed and slaughtered like they are as of right now. But it really does come down to the leader, because if you have a strong leader, then your enemies are not going to be taking the risks that they're doing right now. I mean, it's all for their political gain as well, right? That is all these wars are about. And that's what all wars have always been about. I mean, you look at all the ancient civilizations, all the greatest wars that have ever occurred, it was all just based around political gain, And a lot of the dilemmas that we still deal with are caused from those prior wars. Now, the wars that are occurring as of this moment, these are just strategic moves. These are all strategic moves. And it's scary to know that that is the main reason why these are occurring.
Yeah, I sort of agree with. So think about we're seeing this sort of escalation in war lately, right? The Ukrainian thing sort of is getting to its point. We have the whole thing with Israel, the Gaza Strip. Now we have Hezbollah, the Houthi, and then you have these missiles that were launched by Iran, right? And it's like, why is this all happening, right? Why is this all? Because the window of opportunity, they see as soon as the election happens, then something's going to change. They don't know who the next president will be, and they don't know what the policy of that next president will be. Even if it's Kamala or if it's Trump, they don't know. And so this is their window of opportunity to do whatever they're going to do, right? So this is where they have to escalate things up, because once the new president comes in and they make determinations about how they want to support foreign wars, like Israel depends on our military industrial complex. They also have dependency upon a lot of the cash that we give them. And we say, no more cash, and we're not going to sell you any more weapons. What do?
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I mean, like, if you think about it, when it comes to a leadership standpoint, most people have forgotten that Joe Biden is still the acting president. Most of the world is probably still thinking, like, they're so focused on Trump and Kamala that they don't even really recognize that there is someone still in control as of this moment.
And so these foreign players know there's a limited window. And so things escalate until we get to our election. And then at that stage, I think you'll see things sort of de-escalate. I think you'll see the whole thing with Ukraine completely de-escalate after this election. Depending, but I think so, regardless of who comes in office. I think you'll see the same thing with the whole Israeli, Iran, Hezbollah, Houthi situation. I think you'll also see that de-escalate as soon as our election's over. It's just right now there is a window that these foreign players need to take action in, because it's closing. They have 30, 40, 50 days tops.
And we could be completely wrong too, because honestly, I have no idea how they're running the show. It is crazy.
Well, they do these things where they show like election cycles, and then they also show like military conflicts and stuff. And there's a lot of times, and it's funny, they also show moon cycles for these things as well. It's really funny. Full moon's good, dark side of the moon bad. So, but you'll see in our election cycles, there are these moments of increased war across the world as we get towards elections, midterms or presidential terms. And then they sort of lower down, and then they kick back up.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you go, well, why? Well, right now people need money to get reelected. And that means the military complex is going to basically be part of the special interests. They're going to be funneling their campaigns, looking for contracts, and they're also going to be looking to basically sell those weapons to somebody, have them used by somebody.
I mean, and if you look at like what happened in 2020 leading up to 2020, you had the COVID pandemic, which was a global warfare, like that's a different form of war. But that was a gruesome war in itself as well, right?
Yeah, well, and just the war, and then you think about the pharmaceutical industry and what they did, that whole thing.
yeah.
Oh man, this is why I wanted RFK, right? Because of the
Mm.
pharmaceutical industry. This is
So yeah,
just-
every 4 years you can expect something to pop off. You know, it's just kind of the route that it's always been like that too. Like people need to recognize this has been going on for much longer than they recognize. You know, like it's been happening nonstop. Like if you look at a lot of the catastrophes that have occurred, just do the time frame. Look at it. See if it happened every 4th year. You know.
yeah, absolutely. You can trend these things. The data's there. The other thing, it's funny is we talk about certain things, but even in TVM, we don't really dive into these topics because we don't get too political as much as we try to just give you an understanding of civics. I think we try to go in that space a little bit more. We try to put funny skits out there so people could sort of just laugh at themselves. Like we have this one skit, I think it's called the Ballot Burger.
I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's where you go in and these people think this menu's like a ballot, right? It's going to have a Republican cheeseburger or a Democratic cheeseburger, and the guy in there and he sees it's just a cheeseburger. What do I do? Like, where's my Democratic cheeseburger? So that's how we are on the ballot too. If you were to take the Democratic moniker off or the Republican moniker off, and you ask people to vote, they'd be like, "What? Who am I voting for? What am I voting for here?"
That's a great point.
And so we get stuck with basically voting for
Party
and
name,
and it's so terrible.
Mhm.
People are just going to vote blue or red. Doesn't matter who's
That's
in
it.
there. That's their party.
Yeah,
We don't
and,
care what they're. Nope. That's how we vote.
And so, like, to me, I liked some of the things that people were saying. Was like, I forget who the guy was. It was a good discussion. He was talking about, instead of having Republican or Democrat, what the platforms are made up of most of the time. And so you could just say, pick your top 2 or 3 things that you agree to on your platform, and then that goes next to your name. So instead of having the word Republican, it says pro-life, guns, or I'm for border, right? The other person can have their things, pro-choice, I'm for unions, or I'm for, so you then you can hold them accountable because now you knew what you voted for them for, right? And I like that idea, instead of just saying Republican or Democrat, because I don't know what they stand for. I have no clue. And then I vote them in office. How am I supposed to hold them accountable?
Mhm.
The guy, I never said that. Well, I don't know.
And that's the irony of the whole thing, man. The irony is that there is no real difference between Democrats and Republicans. It's
For certain,
more
yeah.
so
Left wing, right wing, same bird.
It's a uniparty. Yeah,
you know,
right.
the irony of politics, man.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you both coming here tonight. Before we get to the end here, is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about with the Vote Matters, or anything else, or any future plans with the Vote Matters? What you guys
Well, I
plan on
guess
doing next with it?
for the closing of this epic podcast, yeah, I am looking just to work with anybody that is intrigued in being a part of this project, or just trying to tap into kind of what's been going on. I think my biggest passion when it comes to the Vote Matters is all about ending this division. I am very much about civil discourse. That's probably my biggest passion when it comes to the Vote Matters, is just being as creative as possible and not fearing your creativity and your own, storyline. Your storyline needs to be heard. Everybody needs to hear your storyline. And if you're too afraid to share that, then what I'm saying is take a risk on it. Take a risk on your storyline and see where it takes you, because you might wind up on the Sam Dever podcast. That's my closing line.
Well, you'll get another last word before we get out of here, but that was fantastic.
Oh,
That was
nice.
great.
No, I was just gonna say I sort of think that was perfect. I can't disagree with what you said.
And I got to ask you guys, do you guys have any predictions on what's going to happen with this election? Because this will come out before it happens.
So, so the prediction I have from this election is this will be the last time you'll ever see mainstream media actually having an influence on an election. I think they basically torched themselves so badly, especially with the last ABC thing. Everybody's just going to be moving to podcast. Everybody's going to be moving to social media to get their content out. I think this is the last time you're going to see the traditional, the legacy media having the sway that they have in an election. I think it's done. I'm pretty sure by the next presidential election, it's going to be a completely different format.
All right. You got any predictions?
I mean, oh, it's gonna be hard to tell. I think I'm more afraid of what's gonna happen with the loser than I am what's gonna happen with the winner. Um, and I'm hoping that people can just keep calm and recognize you got a shot again in the next 4 years, you know? And I mean, like, if the president is not doing as well as they're doing, you know, in 2 years, you can kick him out of office as well. You know, like, you have options. Don't think that once this person is elected, regardless of who you are, if you like him or don't like him, just don't let your emotions cloud and make sure that, you know, you get to the local elections. You make sure that you were present at creating a safe environment at your home. And whenever you do, don't make an enemy within. Just don't do it.
Yeah. So yeah, from the national election, I agree with you. Like, even if you get the president you don't want, 2 years later you get the Congress you do want, right? And usually that nullifies any power of the president. So if the president's Republican, the Congress is a Senate or a Democrat, it's done. There's nothing going to happen. Same thing with the Senate. So yeah, I'm not. Like I said, this thing is an aircraft carrier when it comes to the national level. One man is not going to change the destiny of that aircraft carrier anytime soon.
And
It's
to the credit to the forefathers and what we were talking about earlier, I mean, there's probably a lot of cons though, but are those some of the pros to the way our system's set up that
Well-
one person can't just take this aircraft carrier?
Well, that's the beauty of the American experiment, my friend, is we have a system of government that has lasted now for 200 years, and it's all based on a peaceful transition of power, right? Actually, I think it's 250 years now.
It's almost 250 years.
And that peaceful transition of power is what keeps us going. What keeps us stable. And like I said, if you really want to see what's out there, and you really want to digest a third world country and understand that you have it good, then I suggest to do that. I suggest you go out there, you stay with the locals. You don't even go into like the resorts. Don't even touch the resorts. You get the local cab guy and you tell him to take you to like some local spots. You talk with the people, you learn their tongue. You will start to recognize exactly what kind of home you have here.
Yeah, when you think about like the founding fathers, the one thing like that is incredibly insightful was they wanted the will of the people to basically determine their own fate versus a monarchy, versus a theocracy, versus a dictatorship, you know? And so, how do you establish something like that? I can't think of a better institution than our country has, than the Constitution, the three branches of government, to keep them checks and balances. And I agree 100%. It is the great experiment. And why is it called the great experiment? Because it's had its hiccups. It's not perfect. It had slavery. It's had poll tax. It's had, women couldn't vote until we got to the 19th century or 20th century, right? We had the Civil Rights Act. We have all these things that it keeps course correcting. And it's trying to get to a more perfect union. That's why I say trying to get to a more perfect union. You'll never get there, but it's on a path that it just keeps going to trying to be a more perfect union. I don't know of any other kind of government in this world that is always, every election cycle, every transition in society, we've gone through agricultural, industrial, service, to now we're in a digital era. And our government is withstanding it all. And in fact, it's growing from it. It's becoming stronger from it because it's getting more people involved in it. And we might say it's out of our hand, there's puppeteers. There are. But they can only pull so many strings and that's it. It is an amazing process that we are going through and living through and seeing, not just in one election cycle, but from the past to the future. It's just an incredible experiment that we're on.
At the end,
It's just amazing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this is a nation ran by the people, for the people, you know? So we, the people, are the ones that get to decide the fate of this nation and pave the path for those to follow.
And this is why the vote is so sacred, right? The vote matters.
TVM, baby.
It absolutely matters. If you want this experiment to go on, the vote matters.
That's a perfect setup. So where can people go to check out The Vote Matters? Where are all the appropriate places? Online, social media, where should they go?
Well, as of right now, we just have predominantly we post on Instagram and YouTube. It's just at the vote or at the _vote matters. That's our Instagram. And then for YouTube, it's just the vote matters. But there's also a link in the Instagram, so you could just click on that and it'll take you directly to our channel. It's got all the videos. And then, yeah, we've become a part of the movement, and hopefully, you know, I get to work with a lot of these creatives that sometimes, you know, you have on your podcast as well, because I'm trying to expand this as much as possible.
Yeah. In fact, it'd be fun to actually bring you on and just sort of have a interview on the opposite side.
Yeah.
I even think bringing Eric would be good.
Yeah, no, it's again, we don't
You
get
can tell
to,
us his technical side of the thing, because I imagine I could see him doing his gymnastics over there. It's just an impressive amount of equipment and editing and then putting this all out there. It's pretty impressive.
wait till you see the final edit of this. And Eric, and I'm going to give you guys the last word, but Eric, you got any final thoughts for the night here?
No, man. Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, it's fun.
Really good. And I'm going to shout this out one more time on thank you very much for the t-shirts.
Like I said, I wish we brought an iron.
The vote matters. I even tried to go with the red, white, and blue kind of thing.
I love it.
Yeah, but no, thank you both, Al, TS Niam. This has been awesome. I look forward to continuing conversations. This is important conversations, and I think you both do a very good job at, you know, like you said, it's more about civics at the end of the day. It's more about, and that's what I'm starting to realize, like, quit getting caught up in all the hysteria and actually look at the facts and look at the way things are run from the bottom up.
Yeah.
You know? So,
And yeah, don't get over emotional about who wins and loses. That's a tribal state. That's what you keep bringing up, the whole tribalism. And that is all about I win, you lose. That's an attitude where everybody loses.
absolutely. And I always give the guests the last word. We can go one at
That
a
was my
time.
last word
That
there.
was your last word.
Yes.
Okay. Last word, sir. It's all you.
The final cue. Sam Dever, you're an amazing host. Thank you so much for being here as well. Eric, you got some style to you. I like the tank top.
Thank you.
And, you know, we love the fact that we're here. And I'm hoping that going forward, like I said, I get to keep on growing in this career path as well. I love being an entertainer. I love being a part of the entertainment industry. And if there's, you know, any opportunity, you know, I am always down to do something that is creative.
Awesome. Well, that was beautiful. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. Keep it up. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Hi, everyone. Sam Dever, the Sam Dever Podcast here, and I just want to thank you for checking out this episode. To watch and listen to future episodes, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the Sam Dever Podcast. Thank you so much. See you soon.